All right. Well, welcome everybody to our pre-discovery meeting for the Richland and Chambers reservoirs. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Mia Brown. I'm an Environment and Development Planner with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And with us here today are several people from Half Associates, which are our contract engineers for our Cooperating Technical Partners projects. Speaking also today will be Allison Hansen with Half Associates. We're going to talk about basically what pre-discovery, discovery, and the risk map process is, and why KAGA participates in it, why we invited y'all here today, what products come out of this discovery and future studies that come after this, and how your communities can benefit from it. So this, again, my name is Mia Brown. These are all of some of the core staff that work on these projects from different agencies. So with KAGA, I am the lead for CTP, and many of you already know Edith Marvin, who's the director of the Environment and Development Department. Of course, with Half Associates, we have Jared Overby, Sam Otta, Katie Onley, and then again Allison Hansen. And then FEMA was not able to attend today. They're actually up in Oklahoma and Arkansas dealing with all the flooding disasters up there. But Alan is our FEMA contact for these projects, and then the Texas Water Development Board is also a partner. So as I mentioned, we'll have an overview of the risk map process, KAGA's discovery activities, and an overview of what discovery is, and then we'll jump into the Richland and Chambers watersheds and all of the activities associated with that, and all the different data that we're going to ask y'all for to accomplish this discovery. So most of y'all probably know what KAGA is already, but I think this is an important discussion to have just because it's more of a why is KAGA participating with FEMA on this process. So as all of y'all probably know, we are a voluntary association of by and for local governments. We've been around over 50 years, and we help communities plan for common needs and look at regional opportunities that can be cooperative. So we have over 230 member governments comprised of cities, counties, school districts, and special districts. Now this watershed discovery, as you'll see on those maps, actually goes a little bit outside of our region. We did invite all communities, even if they weren't in our region, because FEMA allows us to do that because, you know, watersheds don't follow political boundaries. And the Heart of Texas Council of Governments is aware that we invited their communities. So I mentioned I'm with the Environment and Development Department. We have several different strategic initiatives that we follow, one of them being watershed management. And so that's a focus on water quality and quantity. For floodplain issues, one of the reasons we focus on floodplains as part of our watershed management programs is because the North Central Texas region actually does not have a unified flood control district. So we have lots of local and regional entities acting on their own, but also cooperating, but we don't have like an overarching flood control district like you might hear of, such as Harris County Flood Control District that covers a whole area. So we actually have a lot of entities working both independently and cooperatively. So our goal obviously is we can't possibly replace a flood control district, and I don't think anybody in our region is pushing for one because everyone I think is working so well together. We're just taking this opportunity to help facilitate regional conversations, get everybody on the same page, and see what we can assist with when it comes to regional flooding issues. Most of our region, so this map is pretty hard to see, but this is essentially a lot of the sub-watersheds in our region. Most of our region is comprised in the Upper Trinity, but we also have part of the Brazos watershed in our region. One of the reasons we talk with our communities and address any issue, whether it's floodplain, transportation, or anything else, is because the population in our region is exploding. We currently have over 7 million people in the 16 county council of governments region, and by about 2050 to 2070, I think 2050 we're supposed to be at 10 million, and by 2070 we're supposed to be at 14 million. It's really hard to imagine twice the amount of people as what we have already. So that's why we're here inviting y'all to have these conversations to help our region grow and avoid a lot of the issues you see in a lot of other metropolitan areas. So this slide is really just to show you, you can see our 16 county area. It has all the blue in it. The darkest blue is showing an up to 500% population increase in the 40 years you see on that map. That is huge. That also includes our southernmost counties where y'all are from, so we're expecting up to 85% growth in the next 30 to 40 years just in this area alone. So that's why we're really happy y'all are here to attend. This is a slide that's going to show, it's basically a different way of saying the same thing. So in 1950, this was the few dots you can barely see on there were our population. And it keeps going, and the purple is the 2040 projected growth. That's spread out a lot, and a lot of that spread is coming down into this southern area. So we just want to emphasize that population growth is coming, and a lot of you are seeing it already. So I just want to talk about what a cooperating technical partner is. This is the program through FEMA that enables us to receive grant funds to come into the communities, do things like discovery, and then subsequent flood risk identification projects that you'll hear about later in the presentation. So you don't hear about COGs being a CTP. You often hear them being states or other regional agencies like river authorities, but COG is a CTP specifically for the reasons I mentioned earlier, that we're here to help with these things because there's no flood control district, and also because our region has actually local CTPs such as Dallas, Fort Worth, Grand Prairie, and Arlington. And so we're actually here to assist our other areas that are not those major cities with bringing federal funds in to help y'all get new flood studies. So we want to help with that better data. We want to help with coordinating between all of the communities in our state and federal and regional entities. And while we're at it, we're always going to assist and encourage higher standards where it's appropriate. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Allison to talk about the risk map process.
Thanks, Mia. So a couple of y'all walked in and started talking about the risk map process, but maybe not everyone is as familiar. So we'll just kind of give a general overview. The risk map stands for Risk Mapping, Assessment, and Planning. And this is a new program that's really designed to speak with communities and get their wants identified and worked on. So it's very action driven. Previously, FEMA had a map mod process, so that was very map driven. They wanted to get effective maps out there and push those effective maps. But this risk map program wants to focus on community conversation and facilitating communication between CTPs, so cooperating technical partners and the communities. The risk map process is identified in 4 different stages. That's that circle that is demonstrated here on the slide. The first step in the risk map process is identifying flood risks. So that's where we can come out and say, what are your flooding concerns? What projects would you like to come out of it? After the flood risks are identified, in step 2, we can do CTP studies. So that's where we can take our preliminary mappings and make them better, get some detailed studies put out there as LOMRs, and then in step 3, we want to make them effective. So whether we go into that LOMR phase or put them on a DFIRM panel through a formal PMR process, but making that effective information that you can use for regulatory purposes. And after that phase, we go into the 4th phase, where you can now make capital improvement projects based on your effective information for flooding. And so you can mitigate those hazards using your regulatory information. After that, we can kind of take a step back and start the process over. Now that we've identified and addressed your top flooding concerns, what's the next round that you want to move through this process? So it really wants to look at your concerns and move them forward, rather than someone coming in and saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, good luck. You know, it's very community driven, and it's a great way for communities to interact with each other to work on common flooding risks as well.
So basically what she's saying, where we're at today with discovery, we're at step 1. We're right at identifying risk. That's what we're here today talking about, pre-discovery and then the subsequent discovery meeting. And also as part of that step 1 is base level engineering, which fortunately has already been done for these 2 watersheds, Richland and Chambers Creek. Step 2 is when you take those BLE data and you convert those into a full detailed study. We'll talk about BLE a little bit later and how it lacks the full detail that you would need for an accurate study. And then 3, as Allison mentioned, is when it goes to DFIRM and you're starting to print those paper maps and digital maps. But really the goal of risk map, and this is something that was lacking in MapMod, is that step 4, is having that conversation and having community involvement. And having all of these product steps, 1 through 3, all of that is geared towards you guys making improvements, mitigating those floodplains, and reducing flood policies for the government, of course.
So the discovery process has a couple of different stages, and it really begins when NCTCOG works with FEMA to identify a watershed. And so watersheds can be selected based on a couple of different factors, such as the risks that it already has or the need for new studies, and also LIDAR availability. So if you're not familiar, LIDAR is a new way that we can take the elevation of the ground surface, and it's more accurate than maybe the USGS 10-foot contours, if you're familiar with those. So it has a nice resolution that can help show what the terrain looks like now, and is very helpful to have when you're going into a BLE process. Once the watershed is selected, we begin with the community engagement phase. So this is where we are now. We're reaching out and trying to get communities involved and solicit their information on flooding risks. And so we have our pre-discovery meetings going on right now, and we'll be soliciting the information that you want to give us starting after this meeting. Then we'll have a formal discovery meeting in a few months where we can all get together again and go through the information that you've sent in and say, you know, hey, maybe a couple communities that are adjacent have identified similar areas for risk. Can we start conversations to get them in communication and get a potential project out of this? After that, we'll formally review all of the data that's submitted both before the discovery meeting and during the discovery meeting, analyze the results, and present our findings in a published report that will be available for you all. So this is just another brief overview, and it shows after the watershed selection, which has passed, we're in our coordinating phase. Usually we will also be beginning the BLE process. That's the new engineering study. That's an approximate study, but as Jared mentioned, that has already been done for both of these watersheds. So that's an excellent way to have a conversation already and take a look now at the results of that. So we'll look forward to gathering the data from you all, having our discovery meeting, and then coordinating how can we move further and talk about the results from our discovery process. So base level engineering, or BLE for short, is a large-scale automated engineering process. This is an engineering process that's best used at quite a large scale. Some of you may have seen the maps coming in or can see the maps here. There are several different counties that can be in each watershed, so it is quite a large area that each one will cover. And LiDAR must be available, so even if you had good mapping back in the past, maybe the ground surface has changed, or we can use a finer scale to look at what the ground is doing and how water can move. There's also modeling that goes into our BLE process. So if you have your Zone A mapping that you know right now, a lot of the Zone A's in these watersheds might not have models associated with them, but BLE is model backed. And so you can use it when you're trying to get elevation certificates or anything like that to get a more detailed understanding of what the Zone A areas will look like.
Yeah, and looking at these two watersheds in detail, you'll notice, and of course you're aware of, that they're primarily Zone A watersheds. You've got some detailed studies on Waxahachie Creek. Corsicana's got some detailed studies, some Zone A's and their boundaries, and then I think Chambers has a little bit on it also. But mostly throughout all the branches, we've got Zone A's. If you look at the FEMA maps, of course, Zone A's don't have BFEs associated with them. So in 2015 and 2016, FEMA came in and did this approximation, this BLE, and they generated those model-backed Zone A's. Are they as good as Zone A's? No, they're not. These models do not have roads and structures in them. The hydrology is not that detailed. It's using regional regression equations, so it's not going in there. It's not taking into account soils and land use and things like that. But it is giving you a discharge through there, an approximate discharge, and it is giving you an approximate water surface elevation. And that information is up on FEMA's BFE viewer right now. So you as a community, if you're talking to a developer and developers looking at a Zone A and they don't know what their BFE is and they're wondering if they're going to have to complete a study for this whole reach in order to determine what their base flood elevation is, they don't have to. You can go on the BFE viewer and you can get that base flood elevation in a report, and that base flood elevation can be used for an elevation certificate and determine what that elevation is. And that can start the process of doing a LOMR and getting that physical map changed.
Some of the outputs from BLE include hydraulic modelings at several different storm events, from the 10-year all the way up to the 100-year storm events. But we do map the floodplain boundaries at 3 different events. So the 10-year event, which is a lot of times the events that we get now, and so they're very helpful for risk mitigation. The 100-year storm events, which is that regulatory 1% annual chance value, and then the 500-year, which is going to be the largest of the floodplains, as it would have the more severe storm event included with it. Some of the non-regulatory products that come out of BLE are very helpful for risk planning and risk mitigation. So that would include the areas of expanded flood risk. These are files that can show the difference between what was effective and currently on your maps and what the new study is showing. So if you have not model-backed Zone A's right now, and you can compare it to those model-backed Zone A's from this new study, you can see, hey, our floodplain looks like it's increasing in these locations, and so maybe it would put more homes in the floodplain, but then we would feel better about giving them flood insurance and making sure that they're prepared in case there was an emergency, or maybe it'll reduce the floodplain in other areas, and so take some people out of the floodplain who don't need that flood insurance or who don't have as high a risk. So it's just a nice way to quickly look and see how the floodplain could be changing. There are also depth grids. So if you knew that there was a storm event and you wanted to come through and see what would the depth be at the corner of Main and 2nd Street, you can come in and click on that location and it'll say, oh, 3 feet of flooding, that's what you can expect. And so you can go through and make decisions based on these kinds of informations. There's also flood risk assessment, which is a HAZUS result. And so the flood risk assessment really ties a monetary value and says, if you have a 100-year storm event, what kind of potential losses could you see in terms of damage to structures or losses in financial or social causes. So
BLE, what we were just talking about on the slide before, has been already completed for the Richland and Chambers Watershed. These non-regulatory products have not. We will be doing those as part of discovery for this and creating those depth grids, creating the flood risk assessment through HAZUS, and also the areas of expanded flood risk. We've already started the areas of expanded flood risk, and that's what these maps on the tables are.
So we can also go over those for your specific community today if you would like to.
So as she was saying, that's that intersection of what you have on the paper maps right now with how those determine those flood limits and Zone A's back in the 70s and 80s is some kind of voodoo versus what BLE has determined based off of updated terrain and LiDAR.
And so when Alison presented the first slide about risk map and you saw that circle, we had 4 phases of risk map components. One of the third phase was communicating risk. And so as you can see, the non-regulatory product is one of the ways that FEMA is using to help communities communicate flood risks to their constituents. So traditionally, the NFIP was just used to do flood insurance rate maps. They were not flood insurance risk maps. And so FEMA is saying, okay, we've done all these maps that are for regulatory purposes. We use it for flood insurance rating, but then we know that flood risks always sometimes extend past the extents of the maps that we have on the regulatory products. So how do we create other products that communities can use, like emergency managers and all the floodplain administrators can use to help them manage risks in the floodplain? So these data sets are going to be new for some of you all, and we encourage you to go to the website which we demonstrated to know how you can use these data sets, because it really helps you to understand how flood risk is changing within your communities, because all these polygons is just telling you the probability of flooding. But then, for example, when you get a handle of the flood risk assessment, you are going to start looking at, okay, what are the consequences of the flooding? When I get a 10-year flood, how many buildings in my community are going to be affected? What is the cost to my community? How much debris, do we have to collect when all the trees in a particular subdivision comes down when we have major storms? These are the kind of data sets that will help you and give you tools to help you manage flood risks in your communities.
Yeah, and prioritize those capital improvement projects too. if you've got this large monetary value associated from this flood risk assessment to an area that floods, it can really help, push that up the prioritization list, something that you can give the city council as an argument of why this project may supersede this other one.
So BLE is also a really great starting point if you want to move forward and get a detailed project or detailed assessment in the future. So that's when we can come back in and add the roads and the structures. It's also a great way to bring communities together and communicate the different risks across political jurisdiction lines. But it's also very nice from a cost-effective standpoint. It's a really good bang for your buck because it's somewhat automated. It comes in at a cheaper price than if we were to come through and do an entire detailed study throughout the entire watershed. And it is better than any approximate zone A's that are not model backed right now. So if you want to just keep your BLE mapping and update it compared to your zone A effective mapping, it is a much better product already.
Yeah.
The reason why it says cheaper on there is because COG, as a regional agency, we try to take on that burden of applying for grant funds. So nobody really likes doing that. It's very complicated. So we apply for those grant funds from FEMA, and the way that the phase 2 works was flood risk identifications, where we look at that better detail than you would see in the BLE. Is those studies can cost, depending on the scope of your study, that can be hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what FEMA does is they will contribute a 75% federal match, and so those are the funds we're applying for as COG, and then the local communities participating would do 25%. That 25% actually gets cut into chunks and can be even more palatable if you're several communities working together. So for example, if you have a 20-mile reach of stream and you've got 3 communities on it, they're going to split that 25%. So it's a really good way to get federal funds, and we're out here because, like I said, we've got our other big city CTPs, but we're all really working together because in FEMA Region 6, which is Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, and New Mexico, within our own FEMA Region 6, we're competing with those other areas for federal funds. So we're jumping in here trying to bring some of those, as much of that federal funding as we can to our region, and so that's the long version of why it says cheaper on there. So that's why we definitely encourage, if y'all are wanting that flood study later in the risk map process, when we get into that next step, that's when I say, please come to me and we can talk about your project scopes and see what kind of funds we can get.
Yeah, and as Mia was saying, the population growth in this area is just huge. The Californians are coming. So it's good to jump out front and get those, that detailed study established for what kind of development that's probably going to come in on the backside of that population rush.
I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
So, I wanted to talk about just what our discovery activities have been since we became a cooperating technical partner. You've heard us mention MapMod and other things very frequently throughout this presentation. So basically we started in 2009 and worked with the Water Development Board to conduct a map needs assessment. So you can see there's thousands of miles of mapping needs and stream, and basically we identified $44 million in flood mapping needs. So we really started doing discoveries as you're experiencing it today in 2013 by using that data from that map needs assessment. I think we started with the Lower West Fork and some of those more urbanized watersheds in our core, and now we're trying to get all the rest of our watersheds in our region done. So this map is, again, hard to see, but we've done several watersheds already. We've done the Denton Creek watershed. We're finishing up the East Fork. We've done the Elm Fork, Cedar, the lower, I can't even read what that says.
Lower West Fork.
Yeah, Lower West Fork, and then part of the Upper Trinity. So we're really trying to get the rest of our region that discovery data. So that brings us up to 2019. So I know it's easy for us to stand here and say we do discovery and it leads to projects, but y'all probably want to know, but does it really? It does, I promise. So I just want to give y'all a few examples of some post-discovery projects that goes into that step 2 so that y'all actually believe us, and we hope that you participate with us later when those needs are identified. This one is called it's 2015 study on Lynchburg Creek and West Irving Creek. So Lynchburg was actually Shady Shores and Corinth working together. They actually met at each other's councils really frequently, and it was a really cool example of these two close communities partnering with each other to get that updated study, and then Irving did one as well. So they got these studies, you'll all see the same thing on the slide where it says they got new hydrology and hydraulics and mapping for X amount of streams or X amount of miles. And so they always get those flood risk projects with that assessment. Another example is in Cleburne on McNair Creek, same thing for them. And the years are a little confusing, just so you know. Those are the FEMA grant years. So FEMA set aside money in 2015, gave it to us the next year, and then you get 2 to 3 years to complete the study. So I know it looks like, well, that was 5 years ago. Well, we're actually just now finishing some of these up. So the 2016 is finishing up in Cleburne, Parker County, Silver Creek, Tarrant and Parker County right now. And then we have Mary's Creek. This one's really cool too, because this is actually 5 different partners that came together to come up with that 25% match. So Parker County itself is the location of the creek, the portion that's being studied, but other communities and entities that were interested in seeing that study happen and also maybe benefit from it. So for this example, we not only had Parker County on that 25%, but we also had Tarrant County, City of Benbrook, City of Fort Worth, and the Tarrant Regional Water District were all interested in that study. So that was a really cool example of getting 5 partners.
Yeah, and I believe that study was like somewhere close to $500,000 to do this study. And when it boiled down to all those partners getting together and pitching in, I think like the high was $18,000 is what a community had to pay for. So I mean, the benefit was immense, compared to the size that they had to pay.
Yeah, and so these are the studies that, if you're interested in these later, those are the ones I say, please come talk to me. Every October we start talking about these upcoming projects. So that's that 75-25 match. And again, I encourage all as needs are prioritized in the discovery report to really jump on those opportunities, because we're always trying to get federal funds in our region to help our communities. So I guess I will pass it back over to you for the discovery. And that's just the, yes, we actually do something with the discovery data, just so y'all know. So we have a lot of communities that have done flood projects with us.
Yeah, and so kind of building off of that, COG is very helpful in getting these communities together and interacting with them and FEMA so that we can begin these projects, get them moving forward, and communicate the different risks, and bringing these projects into more detailed areas. Some of the projects that she's listed, including West Irving Creek, have already gone effective. So they were funded in 2015, but that study is already on the regulatory firm maps right now.
Yeah, and the important thing I forgot to mention was that when you go through this process, FEMA's providing these funds with the intention of at some point making these effective. But when some communities like Corinth and Shady Shores were like, we want to see this go effective as quickly as possible, please push FEMA. As a non-regulatory agency, we don't do DFIRMs, we back out when we start getting to phase 3, but we do help communities approach FEMA and say, this is what we want, please prioritize us. And in that case, it just happened to be able to slip into a panel update that was already ongoing. So that conversation that we were able to facilitate between Corinth, Shady Shores, and FEMA resulted in that going effective actually pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of an overview of why you should be involved in this project, and we can come back to where we are now. So hopefully you all received our flyer that went out about a month or so ago, and then our pre-discovery newsletter, and that's why you've come to our meeting today. And so we're going over that discovery process, and now we can move into our data collection phase. So this is where we want to ask you all, what are your biggest concerns, and show you how you can tell us. We do have a website set up specifically to help you go through and list out what you think the problem areas are, what you would like to see different, and we can walk through that as well as the BFE viewer that we discussed earlier. So what specific kind of information are we looking for? The answer is quite a bit. We are willing to learn any kind of flooding risks that you want to bring forward. So, do you have a lot of low water crossings that aren't already on our maps here? You can come through and mark all of those up. If you have collections of flood photos, you can send those in and bring that up to us. Do you have a collection of dams and culverts that you know of in maybe a GIS file, if your community uses GIS, or if you just have a list of roads that you want to bring forward and say, hey, these are all the road intersections? We can actually go through and on a web map click on those specific areas and highlight your concerns. We can also take in any kind of documents you want to send. Maybe you have plans that you are moving forward on, you can send those in. I know a couple communities are working on their hazard mitigation plans, so if you have that in development, we can also take a look through that and see what the big flooding mitigation actions are. So this is just a quick screenshot of the website and how you can use the web map to show the specific areas, but we'll go through a how-to at the end of the presentation. But hopefully you'll be able to leave this presentation feeling good about how you can enter your data, so you can enter it online in the next few months. After that, we'll have our formal discovery meeting in the fall, and we'll get back together and go over what you've put through the website, anything you'd like to add to it, and then facilitate conversations between the neighboring communities. You know, maybe one county and a city have a similar or a stream that runs through them and they want to work together and get that restudied, things like that.
Yeah. And the focus is on flood risk. That's what we're looking for. Primarily riverine flooding in the community or riverine flooding throughout the county. And those are the areas that we're wanting you to identify for us and show us where there's needs for an updated crossing, or where you're having areas that have, historically flooded and things like that.
Or maybe even you have undersized culverts that just never work the way that you wanted to. That's something you can put on the map and we can talk about together.
But if you have storm drainage issues also in urban flooding, we want to note those also. You never know when FEMA's going to shift their focus from riverine flooding to urban flooding also. So we'll take that data also.
At the discovery meeting, it's going to be a come and go style. So this was a sit down presentation, but the discovery meeting, you can come in at any part and speak with many different agencies that will be there. We'll have other interested stakeholders like FEMA or the Army Corps of Engineers and Texas Water Development Board. KAGA will also be there, obviously.
By any regional entities, for example, when we did our East Fork Discovery meeting, North Texas Municipal Water District was there. Depending on where we are in the region, we might invite Tarrant Regional Water District, or any of the others that are interested, and they'll come to be available to talk to you about anything related to.
Because you never know when one of those state or local stakeholder partners is going to partner with you in pitching in funds to move one of these base level engineering studies to a full detailed study.
We'll also have another data collection station there, and that way we can just review anything you've submitted or anything you would like to add that you didn't get in that first time when you were on the website.
Yeah, and what that data collection station will be is probably a series of 4 or 5 computer stations set up that will host our website that we'll do a demonstration on. And that way you can sit down with one of our analysts and go through the website together, maybe look at points that you've entered together, that you've already entered before you came to the meeting, or enter some new data.
Yeah, and prior to this, you can also give us a call or shoot us an email and say, hey, I'm having trouble with the website, and we'll still help you out. It's not like you have to do the website by yourself before you come to the meeting. We're definitely here every step of the way. So.
And anybody and everybody's welcome. I mean, obviously this meeting too, but especially the discovery meeting. I know that when we're talking about flood risk, we're primarily talking to engineers, public works, and a lot of our utilities folks, but we also are more than happy and hope that elected officials will come, planners, if you have city planners, emergency management, EP. So we want anybody and everyone that has any sort of interest in this to come. Everyone has a different perspective of what the issues are. If you even have someone that's been working in your public works department or wherever for 30 years and they know every story about every little flood that happens, we want them too. We will take their stories. So bring anyone and everyone.
Because we're compiling all this data to prioritize it.
Yeah, so this is just a quick overview of some discovery meetings that we've had in the past. So it's very collaborative, and we'll look more in detail at maps, so it won't be as sit down as this. It's going to be very face-to-face. Lots of conversations, and this just kind of goes back to Mia's point about who can come. So please just have anyone who's interested and knows about your flooding concerns in your community, they can come in and take a look. And so there's quite a large range of professions that would be involved in that. So don't feel like you're pigeonholed like, oh, I'm the only city engineer, so I must come. Definitely reach out to coworkers or people in other communities that that would be responsive to this kinds of meeting. So what should you bring to this upcoming meeting, not this one today? Definitely bring in any kind of photos that you have, or if you have plans that you want to bring in. Maybe if you are a community that has only hard copy documents, you can bring those in and we can go over them together. You can also bring in any questions that you have. We can talk through different items. If you have GIS data you'd like to submit, we'll also take any kind of like soft copies that you would like to bring. We can copy them over to the computers we'll bring, and that way you don't have to worry about doing a crazy file upload or anything like that. So just anything related to riverine flooding that you'd like to bring forward, we'll definitely take that information. After that, we'll begin analyzing the data that was collected between the different communities, and then what we found working on the BLE non-regulatory products and reviewing that BLE mapping. And we'll go over the findings with KAGA and start with a prioritization. And so obviously every place in a watershed is a flooding risk, and every area has needs, but we do want to make sure we're taking a look at what areas have the highest needs. So maybe there's been a surge in population moving there and we need to address that, or their repetitive loss properties that consistently just get hit very frequently with flooding damage. We also really factor in input from discovery meetings and the findings that you give us from the website. So you can really show us, hey, we have so many flooding risks, our area is very important. And so feedback from you all is great in order to get your community to have a higher prioritization and demonstrate your risks.
Yeah, because the goal is to move those base level engineering projects to detailed studies with floodways and BFEs and letter cross sections and all the good stuff that you can use for regulation purposes. And this information, this isn't just going to go to some FEMA warehouse up in the cloud somewhere. We're turning this back over to you as communities and stakeholders within the two watersheds. This information will be made public to you, or on our website, and so that way you can have all of that, and you can start using that for your community's needs also.
One of the other products that is generated after the discovery meeting is this flood hazard risk map. And so it goes through and uses those non-regulatory products that we've discussed previously. So that's going to be your depth grids, structures that could have financial losses in the event of flooding events. And so it just goes through and shows a map of high risk areas in terms of flooding damage. And so those are going to be the results of that HAZUS data set, if you're familiar with the HAZUS program. If you're not, that's totally okay as well, but it does just show like potential losses within the watershed. And that will be available on the KAGA website. Also, after the discovery, we will show the preliminary products that we would like to, or projects that we would like to move forward, and see, based on your input, what are projects that we think can really get worked on by FEMA and moved forward into that phase 2 of the risk map process. We'll also have a findings meeting next spring. We can talk about what we found during the discovery process overall. So with that, we can go ahead and start showing flooding risk on the website and go over data entry and how you can get involved after this meeting. All right, so this is our homepage. The information was also sent out over email, so the website is just nctcogdiscovery.haf.com, and so the web link will also be sent out after this meeting, so you just click find out more. This is our homepage. It does have several documents that are embedded with links, so if you want to say, oh, who's KAGA again, you can come and click this. We also have a flyer of the risk map process, so you can come through and take a look at their website and see what they have to say about it. We also have a list of acronyms, so maybe if you've been watching this presentation, like, oh, what does BLE stand for again? Those kinds of questions with acronyms, there's a whole cheat sheet for it. You can also come through at the bottom of this homepage and log in. So the email is just going to be your email address. If you have multiple members in your community, all of you can use your own email addresses or share one email address, whatever works best for you. So I can come in and put in my email address at half.com. So the password is going to be all capital letters NCTCOG and then underscore 2019 exclamation point.
And that'll go out in the email too.
Yeah, so that's this information here.
Yeah, this PowerPoint will be made
Available
after this also, so all this information you'll have.
So we'll definitely make sure that you get this information again, but that's just how you can log in.
On the homepage, or even if you can log in at any point in time, there's always an email link there.
Yes, here at the bottom.
Once you email, it triggers emails to a lot of us, and then we can easily give you a call back so you can log in. Because at times, people want to log in and something is happening. So just make sure that you just email us and we'll give you a call right back so you can enter your
And when he
email.
says us, it's not going to some help center.
No.
It's going to us.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
going to us.
So in our last discovery, there's actually a woman from one community, and she inputted the community whose name was above theirs alphabetically, and then sent the email like, oh, I was so excited, did the wrong city by accident. And it went out, and I immediately stood up and I looked over and I was like, did you just get this email? And we just ran around and got it fixed within 15 minutes. So it's definitely coming to us. So you can input what your title is for your community. I've already chosen a community to do this demonstration, but you'll have a drop down where you can select your community and enter a phone number, and then you just click submit. So initially there's this community backgrounder section, and so it has information that we found prior to this meeting, and so you can come through and say, yes, this looks correct, or no, we think your numbers are off. I think we have this kind of population. So anything in here you can come through and choose and make modifications to our preliminary findings. So maybe you have a low water crossing, you can come through and say, yes, we have one. Anything like that. There's repetitive loss information, NFIP claims or policy. So if you have someone that's really heavy on that, they can come in and share their expertise. And then you can come through and say, oh, we're happy to be a part of this, or any additional comments. There's lots of different places where we can come through and write your own comments. So you can click save or save and continue to go on to the next stage. So then this is a question section. So this kind of walks you through category by category what we might be looking for. So first question is, has your community experienced any major riverine flooding events that have exceeded the effective floodplain mapping limits? So maybe you recently had a storm and a large area that isn't on the paper maps that you have right now was flooded because of a river. You can come through and say, we had flooding in all of these locations, and that's not what is currently covered in our Zone A mapping. So we can take a look at that and see, maybe did our BLE mapping cover that area, or did it not? And this is something that we really need to put forward and say, hey, something's going on here, let's take a look. So there's a couple different questions. They kind of vary in topic. So if you need to work on this for an hour and then save it and exit, you can. You don't have to do all of this in one sitting. So you can definitely do it more on your schedule. So there's just a couple different questions that you can go through, and if the answer is no, you can move on, or if it's yes, you can just give a simple explanation of what's going on. There's also a section at the bottom. So does your community use GIS? Do you have these data in GIS formats? So maybe your community has no GIS whatsoever. You can just hit no and keep going. But if you do have GIS and you have these data available, we would love to get that kind of information from you guys. And that would be very helpful in the discovery process and would cut down on how much work you would have to do in the web map. So now we can go to the web map demonstration. When you click on this screen, you just say go to the OMI Map. And this map will automatically load to your community that you selected on the first page. So there's also a little tutorial to walk you through the different steps. So you can say, you know, oh, I want to go back to the home page or get a help link. But if you decide you're going through it, you know what, I got this. You can also hit skip and you don't have to continue through the rest where it identifies different areas. So this is the community, and so you can see here, this is our 100-year floodplain. We do have a legend here on the side, so you can come through and see what exactly you're looking at. So we have the community's boundary turned on, but let's say, you know what, I don't want to look at just the community boundaries. You can actually turn off that layer. So under the Layers tab, you can say, I don't want to see any community boundaries at all. And the map will regenerate without it. Sometimes the map might take a moment to just think things through. So patience is a little bit needed, but hopefully it'll load fairly quickly and get it working for you. So we can come through and take a look at the DFIRM floodplains. So this is what's effective right now. Later on, we'll add in our new mapping so you can review that as well. But this just shows what your community currently has. So in the Mustang area, you know, we have this Zone A approximate mapping right here along Grape Creek. So if we were Mustang community, we could come in and say, hey, let's make some edits and let's show what our flood risk is. So there's this edit AOMI points, and you can start editing. So let's say that Grape Creek is experiencing a lot of erosions and the banks are just completely destabilizing and being eroded. So you could click on that point and then click exactly where you would like to show. And so if you would just like to say it's a significant erosion, you don't have to write anything down, but you could say, you know, this erosion began in 2015. Erosion. So you can leave any kind of comments that you would like. When you click done, you'll notice that this is still showing as red, but you had clicked that yellow triangle. So you might think, oh no, something's wrong. But if you click off or if you start to try to make another selection, it'll show up with the correct symbology. So it's something that always gives me a little heart attack when I first get going, and then I'll click off and I'm like, oh yeah, there it is. So if you have any questions about that, definitely let us know. There are several different topics that you can pick from that are points that are already generated. So maybe you want to show us a dam or like a flood of risk area that you've identified. Maybe you have significant land use change, like a development is under construction and you know that the land is really going to change how it drains. You can just click on significant land use change and put it on the map. You can also do a general flood note. So maybe if you're not sure how to best mark it or pick from the other categories, you can actually draw a little box around it and say, you know, this area always overtops when it's flooding. And so we could come in and say, you know, wow, oh, I didn't draw the box very well, forgive me. So you can kind of click through and do different shapes depending on how you want to. But let's say you've made something by accident and you're like, I don't like the way that looks. You can actually click this little delete button here and it'll get rid of it. So if you do something by accident, it's not a crisis, we can take it out. So all of these changes will automatically update, and anytime you can stop editing, it'll save that information that you've done. And so if you want to come back a week later, it'll still show your previous points and you can keep editing them. So Are there questions about how to use the website? Because this is a great time for us to talk it through.
The website also has an address bar, so you have a homeowner who always calls you and say, I have flood issues in this area. You can just type in the address and go to that area and look at it yourself. It has a couple of base maps, so you can have an aerial background with road names so that you can even look at the buildings and see what's going on there with all the complaints you might be getting as a floodplain administrator. So you can use all these tools at your disposal, and you can call us anytime so we can walk you through this so you don't have to do it yourself. We are always going to set up time for you during this data gathering process. So give us a call and we can spend an hour with you and get all the data for you so you don't have to do it yourself if you're not comfortable doing it. Again, you want to remember that when you are on the website, at least if you can go to the website, it tracks your progress. And so as you begin to enter data, it's going to be tracking your progress on the top bar. So anywhere you are during the data gathering process, it tells your percentage completion. But then once you've completed everything, you say 100%. You can always come back, even if it says 100%, to enter more data. We want to assure that this is a secure website. Nobody really can hack into it and do anything at all. We've done it several times, and it's proven that it's a secure website.
So a question on that.
Yeah.
Is this specific to a boundary for a watershed area, or the whole community, if you happen to have a boundary that splits your...
Great question. So if you do have your community that's half within this watershed and half without, the watershed boundary is here, but you can still draw outside of it. And we will take that information. So even if it doesn't come into the prioritization process, you can still say, hey, I submitted it, and FEMA will have it in the report that you've made these concerns known. So we did have a couple communities that highlighted areas outside of it in our previous discovery projects.
And if that area is outside, that doesn't exclude you from a future detailed study for flood risk identification. Just to give you an example, we're currently working with Waxahachie, Ellis County, and Midlothian on Waxahachie Creek. We're going to do a detailed study for that entire stretch. We haven't done discovery in that watershed yet. We're doing the discovery. So we kind of put the chicken before the egg there. Like she was saying, even though maybe you got some flooding issues that occur outside of what we're doing in Chambers and Richland Creek, doesn't mean that you're excluded from the flood risk identification project.
Okay. Are there other questions about this website? All right. Let's go ahead and take a look at that FEMA estimated BFE viewer. So this is the one that has the recent study done with that new mapping, that model-based mapping. So you can click and come to your community area and take a look and see what's going on. So if you were from Maypearl, you could come in and see different flooding boundaries. So right now we are showing this 100-year zone. That's the high risk 1%. So that has a 1% annual chance of occurring within that area. And then the low to moderate risk is going to be the 500-year storm event. And so you can see what your boundaries are. You can also come in and click.
Go to report.
Oh, report.
Go down. Click on map click.
Map click.
Yeah.
Okay. So thanks, Jared. So you can click on an area, and let's say you want to look at this specific location. It'll say, this is a detailed Zone E area, so it's already on the current effective map. So you can go straight to the NFHL if you have that detailed area already. But if you do not, there was another location that Jared had pulled up that shows what the flood risk report would look like for that location. So it can come through and show you what the flooding event is and what your flood depth would be in that location, and the information that you need for that elevation certificate. So how was it measured? What's the vertical datum used?
This website also gives you the ability to actually download the data. And so, someone was asking, I want elevations on my zone A's. This data comes with cross sections that have estimated base flood elevations on it for the 100-year. And so, you have a developer come in, they want to have an estimate of elevations along the stream and not just one area. You can just click on an area and download the data that you need, and it's going to show you cross sections just like BFEs with estimated water surface elevations that you can use for planning purposes. And so the data is there, as she's showing you.
Go to data layers.
Yeah, so data layers here.
Then go down to downloadable data.
So you can click whether or not the data is available for you to download. So it's saying yes, you can click and download that data right now.
Yeah, just click it. And it'll bring up this, and that way you can download the HEC-RAS models, the depth raster grids, the reports and documents, everything that you would need to determine that.
If you go and you're having issues with the download, again, you have our contact and our emails. You can give us a call, and we can even download and FTP them to you, so you don't have to have issues downloading these data sets.
Because we've already pulled down these data sets also because we're using them for our maps. And we'll also include this information in our website also. So you'll have what's on the DFIRM paper maps right now, and you'll also have what's in this BLE approximate analysis, and those will be overlapped in that areas of expanded risk layer, and you can see the difference between the two.